People and communities have grown to expect protection from the destructive power of the sea. But in recent years, the costs of this approach has sparked a debate about how best to manage the coast in the future. The people featured in this film are talking about their experience of dealing with the authorities regarding coastal management over the last 10 years, especially in relation to consultations carried out by the Environment Agency and Chichester District Council in 2007 and 2008, when proposals to change the approach caused concern and hostility, and the communities of the Manhood Peninsula decided to take positive action. The active and influential role of the community continues today.
We were then given a fantastic opportunity because René, my Dutch friend, had links with the Dutch Planning Institute, which resulted in the Going Dutch workshop, which produced sort of blue sky options for the area. And these weren't options that the area had to take or should take, but just ways, approaches that they could use. 5 days, unpaid, brainstorming about what the area could do for itself and how it could mitigate climate change and make it work effectively for the area.
Particularly at East Head, there were a number of different agencies involved in managing that particular piece of land, and it was a challenge, I think, for all parties at the beginning, working out how we would work together and then working together to come up with the solutions.
The decision-making process, and indeed the whole way funds are allocated, although it's all published, it's pretty opaque to anybody unless they've got the proverbial PhD in coastal defences. It's a very difficult area for which, where responsibility for different aspects of coastal defence are shared among a number of authorities, some of whom don't have the same policy approaches.
When people really get involved in the whole process, they realise what a nightmare of bureaucracy and red tape is involved in all this coastal management, and how it increases the costs of things, and also how it makes it more difficult for people to engage in the issues themselves.
One of the challenges of the consultation process was the communication between the various parties.
We carried out 2 rounds of consultation on the Pagham to East Head strategy. We definitely learned lots along the way. Some people expressed surprise about the messages that we were conveying.
There was the initial draft coastal defence strategy. I went to the first meeting on that and I was absolutely appalled at what was presented to us. 120 homes were going to be wiped out, our community was going to be destroyed, and there was basically very little we could do about it. As far as they were concerned, we seemed to be just something that got in the way of rubber stamping the plan that had already been drawn up.
People were very concerned about it, and there was a lot of outcry to start with, which I think we underestimated. We did address it, we did hold meetings locally, we did talk to people.
We went to speak to the Environment Agency, and then we went to speak to the District Council. We were dismissed as being local housewives, I think, you know, despite the fact René was a qualified spatial planner and I'd been a risk management journalist for 20 years.
Well, I wrote to my 2 local district councillors and they never bothered replying. So we started a campaign, a fight against the issue. They discovered that, as they have around other parts of the country, that communities aren't necessarily a pushover.
There was also a belief that the legal framework did not allow for much influence at a community level.
The whole superstructure of the planning system, the rules, is so complex that it's going to be very difficult for a local community as things stand to make a big impact. I would like to devolve responsibility as far as possible to local communities in a very clear-cut way, with also, not only on the planning side, but also on the financing side, the authority to take decisions that can enable them to defend their coast.
The main frustration with coastal management is there is no localism in coastal management. It's all generated by the government or out-of-reach people. Although Chichester District Council is responsible for the management of parts of Selsey coastline, the funding and that is still all central.
Although the consultation process did not always run smoothly, it did improve substantially, and lessons were learned on all sides.
They raised the war cry, if you like, that we then had to address. So it made our job very difficult to start with, until we got to them and said, look, why are you so worried? What is it? What can we do to tell you? And just talking to them, listening to them, eventually we reached a consensus.
And suddenly that was a breakthrough. We were able to really engage with the agency people. They were able to understand where we were coming from. We were able to understand the sort of constraints that they're under. A lot of mutual respect was gained.
Both the methods of communication that we employed and the messages which we gave out developed during the consultation, and we would want to use the lessons that we have learned from that to influence how we can communicate the issues with people in the future.
I think we got there in the end, and I think in future, if we had to replan it, we would be more transparent about saying, look, this is the process, guys, this is what we want to do, this is phase 1, this is where we're going to come and ask you, we're not going to make any decisions, we're going to come and ask you what you think about this. Phase 2 is where we go, well, we've had a look at what you want, we've had a look at what the DEFRA guidelines are as to what we can do, and this is really where we're at now. This is what we'd like your views on at the final analysis. And it's a process that we only learnt as we went along. But I think in future we would be far better prepared.
It is hoped that the lessons learned on the Manhood Peninsula may help other organisations involved in coastal management to avoid similar problems in the future and to understand the benefits of early community engagement.